Welcome back to the shop. I'm continuing to work on the hood. I just reshot this with the 2K. As you remember, in previous videos, I'd hung the hood. The first time I'd ever sprayed with a spray gun, I sprayed both the bottom and the top. Both, of course, were very orange peely, I guess if that's a word, and I ended up spraying the top of the hood a second time. Now that second time laid out really flat. I was able to come in with my 220, cut the tops off the orange peel, and it ended up being a fantastic job on the top of the hood. Underneath the hood, I had the same problem. Lots of orange peel, tried to sand that orange peel out, and of course, because of all of the angles underneath this hood, right, everything is a sharp angle, I cut through and burned to the metal a number of places, and I thought, okay, well, that's not acceptable. So I resprayed the bottom of the hood now with 2K primer, and that has allowed me now to hit it again with the 220. But this time I was able to knock the tops off without having to put a lot of pressure, and I only burned through in like 2 or 3 places. I hit that with a spot primer filler, and I'll just let that cure up. The key with the hood though is I want to do something different. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to install hood locks to keep this hood locked down, and let me show you what I mean. So, hood is back on the car. Now, when you're by yourself, there's a little bit of a trick you can do. What I do is I remove the springs from the hinges, and then that way the hinges lie flat on the fenders, like as if the hood was closed. You then take the hood, simply place it on the car. Now, once the hood is on the car, go to the corner of the back of the hood and lift it. When you lift that about 2-3 inches, you can get your hand inside, you can lift the hinge. Now, the hinge is going to bend up because that's how the hinge comes up. It'll contact the hood. You can take one of the bolts and put it up in the front. Now, you'll never get the back because the hinge swings down, but you can get the front bolt in. So you get the front bolt in. Do the same thing on the other side. With the front bolt in on the other side, you can then simply lift the lift the hood. And once the hood is lifted up, you can get the back bolts into the hinges onto the hood. And then what that does is you now have your hood mounted to your hinges. So in my case now, the hinge is been set. The height is the way I want it across the cowl. The reveal is the way I want it. I would like to tighten the reveal up a little bit more, but if I do that, I'm worried that I'm going to move the hood too far back and I'm going to lose my alignment up here. So again, it's a balancing act. So now what do I want to do? Well, everybody knows what these are, right? These are the plates that you usually put on these cars, and you then drill a hole, a pin pops up through the hood, you put a little clip in there, and that is to stop the hood from flying up. That was mostly a drag racing thing, right? You're doing, on a drag race course, you're doing 120 miles an hour by the end of the quarter mile, and, your hood could fly up. So that's what these were originally for. A lot of people now use them because they kind of look cool as well, and you got the clips. Me, it's more practical. We're going to be taking this car, as I said, all across North America, down into the US, across Canada, coast to coast. And the one thing I'm worried about is this car sitting in a dark parking lot overnight. And these cars attract attention. I mean, that's what they do. I mean, people love them. And for those lovers of the vehicle, have at it, enjoy the vehicle. It's for those people who are attracted to the vehicle who may not have a love for them and who want to open up the hood and either steal things or even just destroy things just for the sake of it. So I want to lock this hood down. So I could put the pin through, and I could use a padlock. I've seen people use padlocks. Not my cup of tea, but what I went with, found these. These are barrel locks. And the barrel lock has a pin on the bottom. And the way it works is I'm going to drill the hood, and this then fixes through that, flush to the hood, but it never moves. So it gets locked in, done. Then, when the hood is lifted, there's the receiving pin here. The way this receiving pin works is that when the hood comes down, it locks into the receiving pin, and then it rotates with the key, and now this hood won't open. So the key here is that this gives me that whole locking mechanism that I'm after. So before we get started, a couple of things you want to check. Number one is this bracket here. This, of course, is the original bracket to the car. This is where the adjustable bumper used to go. It would be a rubber-topped bumper that had a screw, and you could adjust the height of it, and then you'd bring the hood down, lock the hood, make sure it was flush with your fenders, and adjust that bumper stop so that it held the hood at that bumper height. It also, the other thing it would do is it would put a little bit of resistance on the hood latch so that the hood latch would lock and not rattle, right? It was really just to stop everything from rattling. I'm going to have to go to the adjustable bumpers that go on the fender bolt here. So this front fender bolt is where the rubber adjuster is going to go. That's going to actually adjust the hood height. So when the hood is closed, that one will adjust and that'll hold the hood where I want it. This is not going to hold anything from the perspective of the mounting rubber or anything. All it really is a place so that when that pin comes down and locks in, it clips into the pin and stops the hood from opening, right? So they would press the release here, but as soon as they try to lift it, these two would engage, and then of course they wouldn't be able to open the hood. So what you want to make sure though, and to get this consistent across the hood, and this is why you want to make sure, is that these measure out at exactly the same distance, you know, to the end of the frame structure here, not to the fenders, because these fenders move, right? So remember, I'm trying to make sure that these are square front and back and out left and right before I drill any holes in that hood, because I want the holes in the hood to be symmetrical. You know, whatever distance they're going to be from the edge, let's say 5 inches, I want it 5 inches on that side. Whatever distance it is from the front of the hood, let's say 8 inches, I want it 8 inches on that side. So we want to make sure that from the perspective of the top of the hood, that those two pins are exactly the same. You would hate to see one out of phase in the other. Now what's going to control that is the position of these under the hood. So we have to make sure, and I'm going to triangulate these off of a couple of measurements. So I'm going to go from 1 point to here, 1 point to here, same point to here, same point to there, to make sure that these are square and that the distances are the same. Because if my hood is square to that cowl and I measure from the cowl and these are different, then it'll be different on the hood, right? So again, being square to the cowl gives me that ability now that my hood is square. I measure from that cowl, and the distance between here and the cowl and over here in the cowl is going to ensure that the distance is the same on my hood. So before I do any drilling, before I do anything, I'm going to place the other pin in here, and I'm going to start doing measurements from the cowl and seeing how square this all is. So that's the next step. Okay, so as I mentioned, right, we have two pins that we're going to perforate the hood for. Now we want to make sure that these pins are exactly the same distance from the cowl, because remember the hood is square to the cowl. So if I can get these two pins exactly the same distance to the cowl, then at least they'll be square on the hood. And then we want to make sure that these are the exact same distance from the center line of the car. Now the one thing Ford did really well is that this bolt here, which is the center bracket, is actually the center line of the car. And that was so that the hood was held exactly dead center. And that makes sense, right? You wouldn't want to hold the hood down on the left or the right. You'd want that dead center of the hood. So what we're going to do then is we're going to take one measurement. We're going to go back to the cowl. We hit the cowl and we come in here and you can see that's 46 1/4 inch to the dead center of the pin. We go to this side, do the same thing, hit that cowl, we are 46 1/4 inch to the dead center of that pin. So as far as the hood's concerned now, the two holes will at least be equidistant along the length of the hood. Second thing, we know this is dead center, so if I put this dead center and come again to the pin, I'm at 17 1/2 inches from the dead center of the vehicle to this locking pin. Now if I come over this way and I go to the center, I'm also 17 1/2 inches to the dead center of the pin. And again, you could adjust these if you needed to. Luckily I don't have to, but I could adjust these, you know, a little bit left or right, or, you know, maybe make the hole a little bit bigger. I'm glad I don't have to do that. These are now square as far as equidistance from the center of the hood and equidistant from the cowl, which means when I drill these holes into my hood, at least from the top view, from an aesthetic position, these will be aesthetically pleasing. They will be, you know, the symmetrical along the hood, and you know, that's kind of what I'm after. So next point is I'm going to mark this so that we can then get an idea of where we're going to drill in the hood. Okay, So what I did is I just put a piece of tape in the indent. Remember, this is where the rubber bumper normally used to rest against the hood. I'm going to be migrating those bumpers out to the side where the fenders are. So that's going to leave me my brackets to mount my receiving pin with this lock set. And what I ended up doing, just to put a piece of tape here, I lowered the hood. There's easy access down here because none of the front grille is in. So what I did is I just drew a line around the pin onto the tape, and that has oriented my tape. So now what am I going to do? Well, 3/16 drill bit just for a starter, and we are going to put a hole in this hood, and then I'm going to enlarge that hole to the point where not only does the pin go in, but it has to be large enough that the washer passes through, which is what the washer is then used to tighten the nut onto the top. And again, we're just going to make our first initial drill, and we'll go from there. So now the best thing you can use are these stepper bits. The reason is because they expand so quickly on a short distance. Now of course you can get longer ones that don't go as wide, but this one here is going to give me the diameter I need, but at only about 1 inch. And that means I'm not going to contact the top of the hood. And even if I do, I might even just dent it, which I'm going to be drilling it anyways. But basically now I got to open this up. And I've already measured it now. I'm actually going to pretty well go almost down to the end, right to the third level, and that'll cut the hole that I need. So I'm thinking instead of making the hole bigger, I'm just going to shave 2 sides of the washer to make it as wide as the hole. I'll just use my calipers to figure out the size of that. And then the second thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to mark the top of the pin. I'll close the hood. It'll then put a mark on the inside. I'll see where that mark is. I'll obviously then drive a drill up through. And then before I make that hole any bigger, I'll use that then as a way to look through that hole and put a lot of light down here so that when the hood is closed, I'll see how exactly dead center I am to this receiving pin. Because I can always adjust the hole, because the hole I'm going to need to drill is going to be fairly large. And if I have to drill a fairly large hole, I can move it around in the area of the hole I drill. So again, just don't drill the hole and then drill the big hole. What you do is you drill the small hole, close the hood, look through, see the clearance, see where you are in perspective of it, and then adjust the drill hole accordingly. And then that way there, when you do drill the bigger hole, it'll be dead center on the lock. And that is really the most important part. So next thing for me to do, I'm going to mark this, mark that, drill a hole up, and then we're going to take a look at it. So what I simply did is I took a piece of tape, right? I got a black spot on it, which is center of the tape. I'm going to take this tape upside down, place it on to the hood pin, and I can see that black dot, so I can visually now put that piece of tape dead center of the pin. Now when we close this hood and put that into contact with the pin, you can see the tape is gone. And if we look up in here, I've got my tape. So I now have a black dot, which is going to be where the drill is going to go up. So I'm going to go drill that. So forgive the lights, but I need a lot of light on here. I'm going to shine the light up from underneath. I'm going to close the hood. There's my hole, lovely. And if I take a look down through, I can see the pin down here, right? So I can see the pin through the hole. And as I close the hood, that is dead center of that pin. And I mean right dead center of the pin. So now I'm happy. I can take this hole and I can make it large enough now to accommodate the cylinder. So the way this thing works is it works that when I turn the key to the right, it locks, right? And that's simply the way they design the receiving pin. The receiving pin goes and it turns to the right. It doesn't go both ways, it's just one way. It then turns these roll pins into the lock, and then that's what locks it. So the orientation of this key then is when I put this on the hood will be like that. right? We're going to have straight up and down, meaning that it is unlocked. And then when I put the key in and rotate it to the right, that will lock it. So the orientation of this is that we're going to take that at 12 o'clock and that one at 3 o'clock. And again, so there's the rubber at the other end of it as well. So like I said, 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock is the way it's going to go. And I'm going to have to do the same thing on the other side because the way the key works, I mean, they're identical. So they're both going to be 12 and 3. I wish I could do 12 and 9. But if I do 12 and 9 by rotating the cylinder, then 9 will actually be the unlocked position and 12 will be the locked position, and I want to keep it consistent so they'll both be like that. But again, it's a very small detail, you won't even notice it. As you can see, what I've done is I shaved the sides of the washer, that way there it fits through the hole. I get this up, and then of course the nut, and we'll then screw this whole thing together, and then I will put it down. I will take the pin underneath here, I'll move it up, and then lock it in, and then we'll lock it and we'll see what happens. Well, this is what happens when you do things live. I learned that even though I put the assembly in, I can't get to that nut to tighten it. What I needed to do, and I guess I should have done in the first place, is the access hole under here now I've taken out to 1 inch. And that way there I can take a 15/16 socket, which fits that nut, and that'll allow me now to get in there and to tighten the nut up against the bottom of the hood to hold the lock in place. Now, once this is drilled and cleaned up, I have a lot of body plugs, right? You know, the black body plugs. I'm thinking, take a body plug, remove part of the center of it, big enough for the pin to get through. That'll clean up the bottom of the hood. It'll give it a place for the pin to go through, but you won't see this large diameter hole underneath the car. I guess this is one of the disadvantages of this type of system with the pin. The hole in the bottom and the hole in the top are relatively the same size. You only have to account for the angle of the hood as it goes up and down for clearance on the pin. But basically in this case, because I need to put a nut on the bottom and I need to be able to tighten that nut, I have to get something on it. The hole under here has to be big enough. Now, of course, I could have probably taken needle nose and tried to figure out how to get in there and tighten it up. But you know what? Once this is all together, or at the end of the whole thing, you know, you're going to want to tighten it up good, because you're going to put some Loctite on it, obviously put the whole thing together, tighten it down, and then it's never coming back out again. And then fixing this hole, again, I'll probably just do that with a body plug. Anyways, I'll get back to it. I'll put the pin back in, or put the lock back on. Well, I'd like to say that was easy, but it wasn't. Basically, what they did is the roll pin that is in the bottom of the lock is a fraction of an inch wider than the nut, which means you can't get a straight shot. You gotta wiggle the nut around the roll pin and then get it on, but then your fingers are in there, you can't get your fingers in, everything, nothing worked. So what I ended up doing is using my magnet and my grinder. So what I did is I took the roll pin and just took that little fraction off of the roll pin. I mean, not even just barely touched the grinder, so that the nut could pass through straight. Then of course what it is, I just took a deep socket, right? In fact, what I did is I took a deep socket and I put a sleeve in the socket, and then that way there the nut sits on top of that sleeve but leaves enough hole to get past the roll pin. And then the washer kept falling down, so I used the magnet, and I simply held the magnet on top like this. I just put it on top, and that held the washer up against the bottom of the hood. And then I used this, and then after that it was seconds. Literally just screwed the nut on, and then once it got to the point where it got too deep, I took the 3/4 inch copper tube out, which left the deep socket. I was able to then just take it and hand tighten it. Of course, I didn't bolt it down, but I hand tightened it, and now we're at the point where we've got the lock in place. So basically what I'm going to do then is I'm going to lower the hood. I'm going to go under here, and let me just show you that. I'm going to go under here and adjust this up so that when this is down and that goes up, It's in the unlock position now, so I will put it in so that it just goes up and down without a problem, and then I'll lock it, and then we'll see if it holds it. I'll see you in a few seconds. Okay, so I've simply adjusted the height of this threaded rod, and again, it's got 2 nuts on a threaded rod, so easy to adjust the height. Now, this isn't going to be used to adjust the eventual height of the hood. That's going to be done by the rubber stoppers that go in here, and that's going to be part of the bodywork videos, and I'll be showing you all of that later. This is really just a test of the locking mechanism. So I've got it up a little higher just so it engages the lock, but here, this is what I mean. So the way it works now is you simply close the hood. Now by closing the hood, that engages that shaft up against the bottom of the lock. Now, of course, I can open and close it as many times as I want because basically it is unlocked. But as soon as I take the key, insert it into the lock, rotate it by 90 degrees, remember that 12 to 3 p.m. position, I now have a locked hood and you can't get in. These are on Amazon. Just search for hood locks and you'll find them. They're relatively inexpensive. I believe it was $80 or $70 for the pair. I mean, for 2 identical locks, and of course they give you 4 keys, and all 4 keys you can use. So they gave you extra keys, which was great. But basically now it's installed, it's all locked. I'll do the other side, and then I'll just take it all apart and put it away. But this is all part of a pre-fit. Remember, everything you do to this vehicle before you put paint on it, you've got to assemble it. And I'm going to be putting everything back on this car. I mean, every panel's got to go back on this car. The doors have got to be aligned. The windows have all got to go in. The roof has got to go back on. Everything has got to be assembled to make sure everything works together. Make sure there isn't anything sticking out of the way, because the last thing you want to do is find out there's a problem after the car has been painted. So this is all part of the process. So the pins are in. The next video I think I'm going to be working on is the fuse box. As you know, these cars came with a 5 fuse box. And with everything I've added to the car, I need a few more than 5. So what I've done is I've found a split 6 and 6 fuse box. And that'll allow me then to have 6 fuses for things that have constant power, like the hazards, the brakes, the interior lights, the seats. All of that will have power all the time. And then, of course, I have 6 fuses then for the things that are switched. So things that are switched, of course, are the power windows and the power top and the stereo and the heater and all of the other accessories that only work when the key is on. So I'll be working on that next. But until then, hope you enjoyed this video. And if you want to do one of these things, you can see it's fairly straightforward. So like I said, best of luck, and I'll talk to you soon.